What's up guys, it's Chris from Step Massive, and today I'm going to show you how I currently set up my hammock and my tarp system when I'm out backpacking. So the tarp I'm using today is probably a little bit of an overkill for this trip. It's fairly warm, but this is the Warbonnet Superfly. It's a really big 4-season tent with doors, storm doors. So again, a little bit of an overkill, but it's all right. We'll get plenty of shade using it. I'll probably set it up wide to get some shade today. So I also keep my tarp in its own stuff sack. It's just the way I like to do it. And usually in my tarp bag, I will also bring a little bag of my guidelines and my bag of tent stakes. For now, I'm going to store these in my Black Bishop bag. And then I keep my tarp in snake skins. So these little mesh snake skins. These are 2 snake skins, each about half length of the tarp. It's really helpful for organization, just keeping the tarp organized. And also once you deploy the tarp and you're ready to actually undo it and set it up, the snake skins just help if it's a really windy condition. So your tarp's not blowing all over the place while you're trying to stake it down. So on my tarp system, I have 2 dedicated ridge lines on each side, a 12-foot piece of line on each side. I don't use a continuous ridge line. I use a dedicated ridge line. I do use some hardware on my tarp. I use these little Dutchware tarp flies. And it's a little piece of hardware. I won't go into it too much. There's plenty of videos on how these things work. And what I have today is I've got the tarp fly actually run through the little grommet on the end of my tarp. I used to have it loose on the guy line string. So I've actually got a loose piece of guy line here. This used to be permanently attached to my tarp. Now I'm keeping it loose. I have a loop at one end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this around the tree and I'm going to pass the line through the loop, and that will leave me this big old 12-foot line coming away from the tree, which I will then attach to the tarp fly on my tarp. Oh, and today there is no chance of rain, very, very light wind. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to run my tarp really high. I'm basically going to put it up as high as I can with the goal of actually being able to stand up underneath it. And then I'm going to run it out flat, at least in the front, in a porch mode, because I don't really have any need for protection from the elements on this trip. This is more just a relaxing in the sun by the creek chill trip, mainly just to have some shade over us. All right, so I've got my first guy line around the tree. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this through the tarp fly on one end, just kind of general estimate, just to get it tied up to the tree, and then we'll go hook up the other side and start making some adjustments. Maybe right about there. And with that, I've got a super solid knot on that side that is not going to give. It just took me a second using the tarp flies. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And again, I'm going to put it up at about as high as I can. Okay, so now that I've got the other side secured, I can now start tensioning this. So it looks like I'm going to have to pull that side a little tighter, because this, I think, I want it to be about right here. And that is one of the things about, hammock and tarp camping is you do need to, once you set things up, you do need to do a fair amount of adjusting. And in my opinion, that's part of the fun of it is, tweaking things and getting everything right. Okay, so I'm just going to start tightening each side until I get it fully tight while in the pretty much centered over the hammock. And yep, I'm going to have to tighten the other side again. Just little adjustments. Maybe we'll get away with one more. There, that'll be good. So now I'm going to tighten this pretty much as tight as I can. Not crazy tight because you don't want to damage the trees, but pretty firm. All right. Okay, so as you can see, the tarp is pretty high up over the hammock. And again, I'm only doing this because there's no wind, no rain expected at all on this trip. So again, just going to kind of make the tarp as like a canopy, basically, to give me some shade and a little bit of coverage. So the tarp is in the position where I want it to be, and next step is to go ahead and deploy the tarp. And we'll just go ahead and slide it over. So since I am doing a porch mode today, which is I want the front of my hammock facing the view I want to have, I've got the creek down here behind you guys. I want to bring the front out wide. So first thing I usually do, and I'll typically do this when I'm actually selecting my trees, is I'm going to look for any other trees out in front of me that I can use to tie off the edges of the tarp to. I see maybe I could use like this thing right here for this end. I was thinking maybe I could tie it here. That's not really going to work. So probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of my trekking poles, and I'm going to use both of the trekking poles to elevate the two front sides here. So what I typically carry these days for my tarps as far as guy lines is I usually carry a bunch of 12-foot lines with a little mini carabiner on the end of each one. Now that's a little heavier than what I used to carry. I used to carry like a few 12-foots, a few 6-foots, and a few 4-foots. These days I've just gotten lazy and I just bring a bunch of 12-foots, so I never have to worry about which guy line I'm using in which place. I just grab a 12-foot and get to work. Also, on most of my tie-out points on this tarp, I have another piece of hardware from Dutchware that is the tarp worm. I'm not going to go into detail about what the tarp worm is, but it's just another piece of hardware that allows you to essentially tie a knot without actually tying a knot, which allows me to basically have a knot-free system, and everything is quick release, so it's really handy. And I will put links down in the description below of some YouTube videos about these pieces of hardware specifically in case you want more info on that. And so what I do is I extend my trekking pole to the longest length that it can possibly go. And if you don't have a trekking pole, you can use a stick. I might actually see if I can find a stick that I can use for the other corner so that I can keep recording this video with my other trekking pole. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece of 12-foot line with the carabiner, I'm going to undo it, and before I tie that up, I want to show you guys what I do with my tarp guy lines. Is I have a built-in tensioner, which is a little piece of shock cord. It's about a 10-inch piece of shock cord that I actually tie to my guy line with a couple of marlin spike hitch nuts. And I got this idea from Shug Emery's YouTube channel, and basically that allows your guy line, once you pitch it tight during the night, especially if you have a sill nylon tarp like mine is, it's going to stretch a little bit after you've initially pitched it, and as it stretches and there's some slack that comes into the guy line, the shock cord will still keep you somewhat tensioned, so you'll still have a nice good pitch. So I'm going to take the piece of 12-foot guy line with the carabiner at the end. And for this type of pitch, I'm not going to use the tarp worm that's connected to the D-ring here on the corner. I'm just going to take the carabiner and hook it on. And then I'm going to pull out pretty much a little bit at a diagonal, not straight out, but a little bit at a diagonal. And I'm basically going to take right up next to the edge of the tarp, right up by the corner. I'm just going to wrap this around my trekking pole 2 or 3 times. There we go. Stick that in like that. And then I'm just going to take this line and stake it down to the ground. All right, so I've got this side all secure here. Now I'm going to go see if I can find a stick that I can use on the other side instead of a trekking pole. All right, so I found a stick. So I'm basically just going to take another piece of guy line and do the same thing on this side. All right, so I got that stick down. I'm just going to kind of position this in the right spot. And there we have it. Now we've got the front of the tarp in porch mode. If I did have access to some trees out in front of me, I could have brought this even higher up, but this will do just fine. And this will allow me to lie in the tarp, get the shade cover. If it was raining, I'd still have rain cover, but get a nice open view of the scenery in front of me. So I love pitching in porch mode. It's pretty much how I always pitch my tarp unless there is really significant rain or wind. All right, so I've got my front porch secure. So I'm basically just gonna do the same thing, 2 corners in the back, except I'm just gonna stake them straight down to the ground. All right, so I've got the back 2 sides staked down now, and our basic setup for the tarp is essentially complete. So the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna secure my doors and get them out of the way, because I don't need to use doors tonight. So my doors come out like this, and you can pull them down if you need to. But I've attached about a 1.5 feet, maybe foot and a half length of shock cord to each door corner. And then I've attached a little mutton hook to each one, a little plastic mutton hook where I've actually snipped off the part of the hook that closes to make basically just a little hook, a little plastic hook. That allows me to do a number of things. If I do want to get the doors out of the way, I can just take the 2 hooks and with the shock cord, hook them together, and boom, doors are out of the way. And I can either do this on the top of the tarp or I can run them underneath. I typically usually will run them underneath if there's any kind of wind, because if there is wind, they're on this end, the wind can come and kind of flap them up like that a lot. If they're underneath, you don't have to worry about that. Another thing I can do with these pieces of shock cord and the mutton hooks is if I do need to use the doors, instead of staking out the doors, I can use these mutton hooks to either hook them onto things. Like if the tree has something that I can hook this onto near the bottom, I can use that to secure the doors. I can bring both doors down and then hook them together behind the tree. Or I can't really do this in porch mode, but if I was in A-frame mode, I can take each hook and hook it to the D-ring on the other door. That pulls the doors really tight together and really encloses them in like almost like a little tent. But having those hooks on there, there's lots of different ways you can kind of configure the doors. So for now, I'm gonna go ahead and get these out of the way again. And I'm gonna do that on the back side as well. And with that, my tarp system and my hammock system is complete. As I mentioned, I prefer to set the tarp up in this configuration in a really high porch mode, pretty much whenever I can get away with it. If there's no wind and no rain, I will always set it up this way, at least to start when I get to a camp. And then if conditions deteriorate, I can pull it down and repitch everything in a tighter configuration to give me some more weather protection. But today, we're gonna leave it in porch mode. I am gonna relax in the hammock, enjoy the beautiful scene out in front of me here. Again, I'm just in this random creek on some BLM land, but it's beautiful. There's nobody out here, completely by myself. The sun's gonna set in about 2 hours. And there's one other thing I wanted to show you that is an important part of my hammock system. So for me, storage and organization is very important when I'm out hammock camping. I don't like having all my stuff just sitting on the ground, rolling around, getting dirty. Sometimes it's a necessity for certain things, but when I can, I like to get things up off the ground. So one thing I do is I actually use the bag that my tarp came in. This was from War Bonnet. This bag, it's a drawstring bag, and it's got a little, a little thing here that I hooked a S-beaner to. And then it's also got another one at the end of the bag like this. And so what I've got here on my ridge line on my hammock is I've got 2 little prusik knots that I've tied on here that you can just slide around. And so what I'll do is I'll take my S-beaner and I'll just hook them onto the little prusik knots here. So now I've got both ends of this little bag on the prusik knots, and I can then slide them out like this, and that gives me a nice little ridgeline organizer. This is a fairly big bag because, again, this tarp is pretty massive. So this gives me a ton of space in here that I can put stuff while I'm lying in the hammock. And then also I do have the Black Bishop bag over here I can put stuff in as well. And then sometimes I'll also hang my backpack at the head end of my ridgeline too, if I want to get like everything off the ground. So this ridgeline little organizer is awesome. You can buy like dedicated ridgeline organizers specifically made for that purpose. But I just happened to realize one day that this, the bag for my tarp had these little tie outs at both ends, and it works perfectly as a ridgeline organizer. Love this thing. I usually will keep like my phone in there. If I have some snacks I'm eating, snacks will go in there. I'll keep my gloves in there, maybe my reading glasses. Anything that I need to store that I want, readily available while I'm lounging in the hammock, I'll put in there, because once I get in this hammock, I do not want to get out unless I absolutely have to. And so here is a view from under the porch mode of the tarp. We got a little creek going down there, and beautiful little field over here. Some beautiful trees showing some fall colors, even though technically it is early winter. So this will be my view for the rest of the afternoon and tomorrow, because I'm just going to chill here for this trip. This is just a lazy get out into the forest and relax in the hammock for a couple days trip. I got some days off work, so thought I would do that. And anyways, that's how I set up my tarp system, at least in porch mode. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave me a comment below, and I will do my best to answer any and all of your questions.